The auctioneer was already moving to the next lot when Gérard Thibodeau stopped walking. He was 77 years old, and he moved the way men move when their bodies have kept a running tally of everything asked of them over a lifetime, carefully, without complaint, with the particular economy of motion that belongs to men who learned long ago not to waste a single step. He wore a canvas work jacket, the colour of old moss, and a peaked cap that had been washed so many times, the lettering on it had faded to almost nothing. His neighbours in the small town of Lachute, Quebec, knew him as the man who shovelled his elderly neighbour's walk before she even woke up, who kept a garden so tidy it embarrassed the younger people on the street, who said very little and listened with the kind of attention that made you feel, when he looked at you, that whatever you were saying actually mattered. What they did not know, what almost no one in that town knew, was what Gérard Thibodeau had done between the ages of 19 and 43. And he had no interest in telling them. The estate sale was being held in the garage and driveway of a house on Rue Saint-André, the belongings of a man named Octave Blondin, who had died in February at 91 and left behind 2 grown children who lived in Calgary and had hired an auction company to come in and clear the property before the spring listing. There were the usual things: a kitchen table, boxes of Reader's Digest condensed books, a rocking chair with a cracked spindle, garden tools hung along the wall of the garage like a chorus line nobody had rehearsed in years, and on a folding table near the back, half covered by an old wool blanket someone had pushed aside to get at the box of records underneath, there was a military kit bag. Gérard saw it from 10 feet away. He stopped walking. The auctioneer, a quick young man named Poulain from the auction house in Saint-Jérôme, was gesturing at a box of china with the focused enthusiasm of someone who had done this 600 times and still managed to sound like it was the first. 2 men in their 30s, brothers by the look of them, stood off to the side with their arms crossed and phones in their hands, occasionally glancing up from their screens to make comments to each other in low voices. They had come for the tools. They had made that clear when they arrived, and they had spent the first 20 minutes of the sale examining the hand planers and the socket chisels and the wooden-handled draw knife with the professional interest of men who considered themselves connoisseurs of things that other people had undervalued. The older brother had already picked up the kit bag and put it back down. Gérard had watched him do it from across the driveway. "What's in the bag?" the younger brother had asked. "Old army junk," the older one said. "Canteen, some webbing, looks like a field dressing kit. Nothing worth dragging home. Any patches? Insignia? Couple of things. Nothing I recognized." They went back to their phones. Gérard walked over to the table. He set down the canvas tote he was carrying. He lifted the blanket the rest of the way off and looked at the kit bag for a long moment before he touched it. Then he crouched, slowly, one knee at a time, the way men crouch when every joint has an opinion about it, and he opened the bag. The canteen was there, olive drab, the paint worn through at the edges in the particular way of things that had spent time being carried rather than displayed. There was a set of webbing folded with a precision that would have been invisible to most people, but that Gérard recognized immediately as the folding of a man who had been trained to pack his kit in the dark. There was a small leather wallet cracked at the fold. There were 2 unit shoulder patches, the kind that had been cut from a uniform rather than sold at a surplus store, and at the bottom of the bag, wrapped in a piece of brown canvas tied with a bootless, there was a photograph. Gérard did not take the photograph out. Not yet. He held the wrapped bundle in both hands and went very still. The younger brother glanced over. "You collect that stuff?" Gérard looked up. His voice when he used it was the voice of a man who had spent decades speaking only when he had something to say. "Sometimes. $50 for the whole bag is what they're asking," the younger brother said. "Seems like a lot for a canteen and some old patches, but—" He shrugged and looked back at his phone. Gérard set the photograph bundle carefully back inside the bag. He closed the flap. He stood up, took his wallet from his jacket pocket, and waited for Poulain to work his way around to that end of the table. He paid $60. He did not negotiate. He picked up the bag, set it in his canvas tote, and walked back to his truck. The older brother watched him go. "What do you think that was about?" he said to his brother. His brother didn't look up. "Old guy stuff. If you have ever found something that did not belong to you but felt, in a way that had no rational explanation, like it had been waiting for you specifically, type the word found in the comments right now. Because what Gérard Thibodeau discovered when he opened that wrapped canvas bundle at his kitchen table that evening is going to stay with you for a long time. Gérard Thibodeau had served 24 years with the Canadian Armed Forces, enlisting at 19 and retiring as a warrant officer in 1996. Most of those years had been spent with the Royal 22nd Regiment, the Vendus, as they were known, the Francophone infantry regiment that had been fighting in Canada's name since the First World War. He had served in Cyprus. He had served in the First Gulf War in a capacity he had never described to anyone outside his chain of command. He had served in Bosnia during the years when the word Srebrenica was becoming a weight that certain men would carry until they died. He had come home from all of it without fanfare, bought a small house in Lachute, planted a garden, and begun the quiet work of becoming a man his neighbours could rely on for small things, which he had decided was the only ambition worth having left. He had never married. He had come close once, but the woman in question had understood, perhaps more clearly than he had, that some part of him would always be somewhere she could not follow. They had parted as friends. He still sent her a card at Christmas. She still called him on his birthday. That was its own kind of loyalty, and he honoured it. What almost no one knew was that Gérard Thibodeau had grown up in the shadow of a man named Corporal Etienne Thibodeau, his father's older brother, a Vendus soldier who had served in Korea in 1951 and 1952 with the 1st Battalion, and who had been killed in April of 1953 during a Chinese offensive on a place the soldiers called Hill 187, 11 weeks before the armistice. Gérard had been 4 years old when it happened. He barely remembered his granduncle in person. What he remembered was the photograph on his grandmother's mantelpiece. A young man in a service dress uniform, very straight, very thin, with the kind of smile that looks like it surprised him, and the stories his grandmother told him on summer evenings on her front porch in St. Hyacinthe, while the fireflies came up from the grass and the whole world smelled like cut hay and wood smoke. She had told him about Etienne's kit bag, the one he had carried from Valcartier to Poussin, the one he had packed himself the morning before embarkation with the same systematic care he brought to everything. She had told him that inside the bag, wrapped in a piece of brown canvas that Etienne had cut from a tent ground sheet and tied with a bootlace, the way their grandfather had taught him to secure bundles for market. There was a photograph of the family, their grandmother, their mother, their father, the 4 cousins arranged on the steps of the farmhouse on a Sunday afternoon in September 1950, 6 months before Etienne shipped out. She had told Gérard when he was 12 and sitting on her porch steps with a stick in his hand drawing patterns in the dust that the kit bag had never come home, that it had been signed over to a sergeant in Etienne's platoon after the Hill and after the armistice, had disappeared into the general dispersal of surplus equipment and personal effects that happened when an army packs up and comes home and tries to remember who everything belonged to. She had told him she hoped it would find its way back someday. He had thought of that from time to time over the next 65 years. Not as a serious expectation, just as a thought that surfaced occasionally, the way certain things do, without warning and without reason, when you are driving a long road at night or sitting in a quiet garden in the late afternoon. He had not expected to be standing in a dead man's driveway in Lachute when it happened. At his kitchen table that evening, Gérard set the kit bag in front of him and opened it again with the same care he might have given to something much more fragile. He took out each item in turn and laid it on the table. The canteen, the webbing, the leather wallet, empty, the lining intact. The 2 shoulder patches, which he recognized now in better light as Royal 22nd Regiment insignia, the older style, pre-1960s pattern, and the wrapped canvas bundle. He untied the bootlace. His hands were not shaking. He noticed this and thought it was strange. The canvas unfolded in 3 layers. Inside was a photograph, black and white, printed on the thick stock of the 1950s, slightly foxed at one corner but otherwise intact. A family on the steps of a farmhouse. A woman in a dark dress, 4 young people arranged around her. The house behind them had a particular roof line, a particular arrangement of windows. Gérard recognized the roof line. He had played on that porch as a child. The house had been sold in 1981 after his grandmother died, and he had not been back since, but he knew that roof line, the way you know the face of someone you grew up with, not from effort, but from the simple fact of having seen it 1,000 times. He turned the photograph over. On the back, in pencil, in handwriting he had never seen but that had the particular forward lean of men who had learned to write quickly and in difficult conditions. Maman, Annette, Gilles, Rosaire, moi, Septembre 1950. Je reviendrai, I will come back. Gérard Thibodeau sat at his kitchen table in Lachute for a very long time without moving. Outside the street was quiet. The neighbour's dog made one small sound and then was silent. The kitchen clock moved through several minutes that Gérard did not track. When he finally stood up, he went to the second bedroom that served as his office and opened the cabinet where he kept his family documents. In a folder behind his discharge papers, he found the envelope his grandmother had given him at her kitchen table in 1979, 2 weeks before she died, pressing it into his hands with the urgency of someone settling an account. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of paper in her handwriting, listing what she remembered of the kit bag's contents. The canteen with the dented side, the webbing folded in the way her father-in-law had taught Etienne, the leather wallet with the broken stitching at the left corner, the photograph wrapped in canvas cut from a ground sheet tied with a bootlace, and the inscription on the back which she had memorized from the afternoon Etienne had shown it to her before he left, pressing it into her hands and asking her to remember the words in case something happened, and the photograph needed to be identified. Je reviendrai. Gérard compared the broken stitching on the leather wallet. It was on the left corner, exactly as his grandmother had written. He sat down on the edge of the office chair and pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes, and he stayed that way for a while. He was 73 years old, and he had learned over a lifetime that grief did not go away. It found new rooms to live in. It waited, and when you least expected it, it walked back out into the hall and stood there in the light and looked at you. And the only honest thing you could do was look back. He went to bed very late. He slept well for the first time in longer than he could clearly remember. Over the next week, Gérard Thibodeau did what he had always done when presented with a problem that required patience and method. He worked. He contacted Veterans Affairs Canada and was referred to the Library and Archives Canada Military Records Division. He submitted a request for the service record of Corporal Etienne Joseph Thibodeau, service number K612248, 1st Battalion Royal 22E Regiment, Korea, 1951-1953. He drove 40 minutes to the nearest Service Canada office and had the request notarized. He wrote a letter to the Royal 22nd Regiment Museum at the Citadel in Quebec City, describing the items and requesting any information on the dispersal of personal effects from the 1st Battalion post-armistice. He also made a phone call he had been putting off for 30 years. He called his cousin Rosaire's daughter in Drummondville. Rosaire had been one of the 4 young people in the photograph, and he told her what he had found. She was silent on the phone for so long he thought the connection had dropped. Then she said very quietly, "Grandmaman always said it would come home." "I know," Gérard said. "She told me too." On the 5th day, a response came from the regiment's museum archivist, a careful woman named Pelletier, who had spent 20 years reconstructing the paper trails of men the official record had reduced to numbers. She had found a logistics entry from September 1953, documenting the transfer of personal effects from the 1st Battalion to a holding depot in Petawawa. Among the items listed was one canvas kit bag, olive drab, contents unspecified, attributed to the estate of CPLEJ. Thibodeau, K612248, noted as unclaimed by next of kin. The depot had closed in 1961. Its contents had been auctioned through the Crown Assets Disposal Corporation. From there, Pelletier wrote, "The trail went cold, as it did for so many things from that era," she added, with the particular sadness of someone who had followed too many trails to their end. But the notation matched, the service number matched, the timeline matched, and the roof line in the photograph matched. On the 7th day after the estate sale, Gérard drove back to the auction house in Saint-Jérôme. He had called ahead and asked to speak with Poulin, the auctioneer, and with the Blondin family representative who had arranged the sales. He brought the kit bag in a canvas carrier. He brought the letter from the archivist and the folder of family documents, including his grandmother's handwritten inventory. Poulin met him in the office off the main floor. The family's representative, a woman in her 50s, one of Octave Blondin's daughters, who had driven down from Calgary and was managing the estate by phone and the occasional grim weekend visit, was there as well. Her name was Louise Blondin Carrière, and she had the face of a woman who had been making practical decisions under difficult circumstances for several months and was holding up through the specific discipline of keeping every interaction professional. She looked at the kit bag when Gérard set it on the table. "I didn't know my father had anything like this," she said. Her voice was steady but careful. "He didn't talk much about that period. He was a young man in the 50s. He was born in 1932. He would have been in his 20s when the war ended. There may be a connection through the depot sale," Gérard said. He laid out the archivist's letter and the Crown Assets notation. He explained, without excess, who Corporal Etienne Thibodeau had been and what the photograph represented. Louise Blondin Carrière looked at the photograph for a long time. Then she turned it over and read the inscription on the back, and her composure, which had been very well maintained, shifted slightly, not breaking but moving, the way a current moves under a surface when something is passing through it. "He never mentioned it," she said, almost to herself. "All those years he had it, and he never mentioned it." "He may not have known what it was," Gérard said, "or he may have meant to find out and never did. These things get set aside." She looked up. "You paid $60 for it?" "Yes. I'll refund." "No," Gérard said very quietly. "You won't." He paused. "I would ask only one thing. If your father ever wrote anything down about where he acquired it, or who he bought the depot lot from, any record at all, I would like to know. For the family history. My cousin's daughter has children. They should know this." Louise Blondin Carrière nodded slowly. She looked at the kit bag again. Then she looked at Gérard with the expression of a woman recalibrating something. "My father kept a ledger," she said. "The kind men kept before computers. Purchases, expenses, date. It's in the house. I haven't gone through it yet." She paused. "If there's something in it, I'll contact you." She called him 3 weeks later. There was an entry from 1961, in Octave Blondin's tidy handwriting, recording the purchase of a lot from the Petawawa disposal sale for $12. Among the items listed, one canvas field bag, army issue, contents misc. He had kept it for 62 years in a box in his garage. He had never opened it. Louise thought he had probably forgotten it was there. Gérard thanked her. He wrote down the date. He added it to the folder. The two brothers from the estate sale, the ones who had dismissed the kit bag in 40 seconds over their phones, ran a military antiques and restoration business out of a unit on the industrial road east of town. Their names were Frédéric and Martin Archambault, and they had a reputation in the regional collector community for being knowledgeable about certain things and impatient about everything else. They had a wall in their shop where they displayed photographs of significant pieces they had handled, photographs with small typed cards beneath them recording provenance and unit and date. Gérard had not planned to go there, but his cousin's daughter had asked, and he found he could not say no. He drove over on a Thursday morning with the kit bag over his shoulder and the folder of documents under his arm. The shop smelled of gun oil and preservation wax, and the particular dusty density of places where old things are taken seriously. Frédéric Archambault was behind the counter, examining a set of cap badges through a loop. His brother Martin was in the back room and came forward when the door opened. They recognized Gérard. He could see it happen. The slight recalibration of expression. The replacement of reflexive professional assessment with something more careful. "You were at the Blondin sale," Martin said. "Yes," Gérard said. He set the kit bag on the counter and stepped back. Neither brother spoke for a moment. Then Frédéric set down the loop and came around the counter. He opened the bag with the trained movements of someone who had handled a great many objects that required care, and he began to lay out the contents. When he got to the shoulder patches, he paused. "These are pre-60 Van Doos," he said. "The older Pelican pattern." He looked up. "Yes." Martin had picked up the leather wallet. He turned it over in his hands, examined the broken stitching at the left corner, set it down with a deliberateness that acknowledged something. He looked at Gérard. "Where did this come from?" Gérard told him. He told him all of it. The estate sale, the photograph, his grandmother's list, the archivist's letter, the depot entry. Octave Blondin's ledger. He set each document on the counter as he named it. He spoke without drama, in the same even tone he had used for 24 years when delivering information to people who needed to understand a situation accurately. The shop was very quiet by the time he finished. Outside, a truck went past on the road. A phone somewhere in the back room buzzed once and was ignored. Frédéric Archambault looked at the inscription on the back of the photograph for a long time. Then he set it down on the counter, with the particular careful movement of a man handling something that has become, in the last 5 minutes, a different category of object than it was when he picked it up. Martin cleared his throat. He looked at Gérard directly, and there was something in his face that had not been there when Gérard walked in. A discomfort, specific and honest. "We looked at that bag at the sale," he said. "I know, we didn't." He stopped, started again. "We didn't look properly." Gérard shook his head once. "You weren't looking for this, you had no reason to still." Martin was quiet for a moment, then, "We owe you an apology, sir, for the way we talked about it." "You owe me nothing," Gérard said. "You didn't know." No one knew. Frederick had been looking at the photograph again. He set it down and looked at Gérard. "Would you let us document this? Properly. Provenance chain, photographs, the whole record. We have a contact at the Regiment Museum in Quebec City, and there's a Korean War Veterans Memorial Archive in Ottawa that should have this on file." He paused. "We'd like to get this right, since we got it wrong the first time." Gérard thought about it. He nodded once. They spent 2 hours in the shop that morning. Frederick photographed every item, every document, every annotation. Martin drafted a provenance summary that traced the bag from Valcartier to Pusan to Hill 187, to the Petawawa Depot to Octave Blondin's garage, to a folding table at an estate sale on Rue Saint-André to Gérard's kitchen table in Lachute. The record was 12 pages when they finished. Martin printed 2 copies. He gave one to Gérard, put the other in the shop's archive. Before Gérard left, Frederick asked if they could put a photograph of the bag on the wall. Not the photograph of the family, that was Gérard's, but a photograph of the bag itself with the provenance card beneath it. Gérard said yes. He walked to his truck in the thin spring sunlight and sat for a while before starting the engine. The kit bag was on the seat beside him, and he put his hand on it for a moment, the way you put your hand on something that has finally arrived after a very long journey, without quite knowing what to say. He drove home. He set the bag on the shelf in his front room, above the small photograph of his grandmother that had stood there for 15 years. He set the family photograph beside it. Etienne's photograph, the one from the farmhouse steps in September 1950, in a simple wooden frame he bought at the hardware store the next morning and stained himself with the same linseed oil he used on his garden tools. Beneath the photographs, on a small piece of card he cut and lettered by hand, he wrote 2 things: Corporal Etienne Joseph Thibodeau, Vandus, Korea, 1951 to 1953. And beneath that, in his uncle's own words, Je reviendrai. He came back. It took 70 years. He came back. His cousin's daughter drove up from Drummondville the following Sunday with her 2 children, a girl of 9 and a boy of 12, and the 4 of them stood in Gérard's front room in the afternoon light and looked at the photographs together, and Gérard told them what he knew, which was more than he had ever told anyone about his family before, and he found that the telling did not diminish it. It added to it. It made it something that would continue. Every November 11th, Gérard Thibodeau takes the kit bag down from the shelf and sets it on the table. He takes out each item in turn, the canteen, the webbing, the wallet, the patches, and he holds each one for a moment before replacing it, the way you hold something that has earned the right to be held carefully. He refolds the webbing the way it was found, in the way of a man trained to pack his kit in the dark, and ties the canvas bundle closed with the same bootlace, worn soft with age, that Corporal Etienne Thibodeau tied it with the morning he shipped out from Valcartier in January 1951. Frederick Archambault made a copy of the provenance record and sent it to the Korea Veterans Association of Canada. They published a summary of it in their annual bulletin. 3 people contacted Gérard afterward, 2 with information about men who had served alongside Etienne, 1 with a photograph taken at Pusan in the spring of 1952, in which a thin young man with a particular forward-leaning smile is visible in the second row, carrying a canvas kit bag across his shoulder. Gérard had the photograph framed. It hangs beside the other one now. There is a canvas bag sitting in a garage somewhere, in an attic somewhere, in a storage unit somewhere, that belongs to someone who does not yet know it belongs to them. There is a name written on something inside it, in pencil, in the handwriting of a young person who packed their kit carefully and went somewhere difficult, and hoped not unreasonably to come home. Most of those bags never move. They wait in the dark until someone sells the house or empties the unit, or sets the contents out on a table on a quiet Saturday morning and hopes for $60. The people who recognize them are not the experts. They are not the ones with the loupes and the phones and the professional assessments. They are the ones who have been looking, without quite knowing it, for a very long time. Be one of those people, and the next time you walk past a quiet old man who doesn't talk much about himself, remember Gérard Thibodeau. Remember Corporal Etienne Thibodeau. Remember that J. Revendry was not just a promise made to a family on a farmhouse porch in 1950. It was a promise made to all of us by all of them, and the least we can do is make sure they are not forgotten. Subscribe to Echoes of Courage. These stories exist because someone refused to walk past. We will keep telling them for exactly the same reason.